I know how much work already a 50 attendee event like in a circle is. Now, I can't imagine you doing it on your own at that scale. How is that possible?
Welcome 2019, I had no team. It was me, and me. That was the hard part, is I did all of it by myself for years. As far as like all the branding, the marketing, the speakers, everything. I mean, literally everything. It is a lot of work and it's exhausting the whole weekend. And really the whole month leading up to it, we don't do anything here except for the conference. It's just all consuming.
A conference like yours is on the absolutely right track. What is the future of aesthetics? Assume in 10, 15 years, what is the aesthetic industry look like?
People want to feel good from the inside out. And so I think we're going to start to see aesthetics and wellness really converge and be much more of a healthcare ecosystem and not just about the aesthetics part of it. And I'm a big nerd and I cannot wait for that to happen.
Today on my show, Dr. Tiphany Hall, Chief Growth Officer of Aesthetic Record, a practice management software running in 9,000 clinics across US. Lead AR, a customer relation management software, and she also just recently launched AR Sync, a practice online representation and SEO boost. She's host for The Record, a weekly podcast with disruptive thinkers in the aesthetic industry. Co-founder and director of Aesthetic Next, one of the biggest, most successful and best conferences for aesthetic providers in US. Top 25 women leader in healthcare technology, one of the 10 next generation leaders by Mirror Review magazine, and top 50 women leaders in Dallas in 2023 and 2024. Forgive me my typos and grammar in English, it's not my mother tongue. But welcome, Tiphany.
Thank you. I think you did a darn good job, so I appreciate the intro.
Thank you so much. Tiphany, all this was business stuff and success stories and achievements. Congratulations to that. But I'm interested, who is Tiphany as a friend or family member? Who is the private Tiphany?
Well, unfortunately, she's a worker. I work all the time. All of my relationships are work-related. I'm a person who really goes into everything just 1,000% all in. And I think you probably see that even with my intro. We decided to build a business here. I was like, let's build 6 more businesses within the same thing. I'm a go-getter. From the time I was a little bitty kid, my dad owned businesses and we just learned how to hustle and how to work harder. And so as a friend, I'm loyal and I'm hopefully trustworthy, and I'll go as all in on friendships as I do in business. But, I think at the end of the day, if you don't work and make your own way in this world, you'll get left behind. So I'm all about charging forward and being a trailblazer, being disruptive, ruffling feathers here and there, but at the end of the day, getting it done.
Thank you so much. I agree on that. It's the same on me. And people always see these Instagram stories and think, oh, he's on vacation and he's on the flight, whatever. But they don't see I'm literally working everywhere, anywhere, anytime. When I'm going home later, in my bed, I have my laptop on my lap and continuously working. And that's the only way to achieve great things. And I think you are a perfect example for that. Tiphany, an initial question. Your software is running in 9,000 clinics across US. Do you see any trends I'm not sure how many insights you have and how much you see from having this software, but assume a lot. Do you see any trends in economics recently or any major changes in aesthetics?
It's been a very different year. I think historically we've seen the majority of the wallet, the patient spend has been on filler and toxin. I think, around the world that's kind of the same thing, right? We see filler, we see toxin. I would say in the past 6 or 7 months, the actual invoice average has not really changed, but we're seeing a much different set of goods. Weight loss, as you probably know, is all the rage in the US. So I think here particularly we're seeing that patients are choosing to spend their money on weight loss instead of HA or instead of toxin. But we're also seeing a big shift toward the regenerative mindset of, the PLLAs, the CAHAs, the different things that, the whole idea of I want natural, I want something to grow with me. And so I think we're seeing a big shift here. Exosomes is a big shift for us. But I think at the end of the day, when I hear people say that, they're just not coming in, they're not spending money, they are. We do a lot of transactions with Stripe. If you guys know who Stripe is, we do a lot of transactions, millions and millions and millions a month. And it's not changing as far as spend. It's just the basket of goods. I think we're seeing a grossly different basket of goods than we ever have, specifically driven by weight loss.
That's interesting. We're not that far yet. We know about Ozempic and Vegary and all these names, but it's still a very small market over here. But it's always the same. It's starting in the US and then it's swapping over to Europe in a few years. Fantastic. When it comes to business, what are clinic owners or nurses or aesthetic providers struggling most?
Well, I think the mix of goods changing is one of those things. I think they're having to readjust their entire practices on this new mindset that the patient's going to come in many cases weekly, but for 10 minutes, right? We all talk about you need time with the patient to do the consultation, to get to know them, to build a relationship. Well, these visits are quick in and quick out. They're not that kind of visit. They're going to walk in, get their shot, and leave. So I think there is a challenge right now building the patient rapport because there's just not as much time in the office. They're coming back frequently, but they're not spending time there. I think that's always a concern is as the business model begins to change, you have to keep up with that. And you get your feet wet, you get it right, and then it's like, and we're going to change all over again. And so I think there is a sort of an adaptation process to that, an adoption process as well. I think the other thing that we struggle with in the U.S. so intensely here is just talent. It's finding good talent, getting them trained and onboarded, and having them actually stay in the practice and not go build their own practice down the street or take patients out of your practice, take your book of business with them. So I think there's this ongoing struggle with HR. How do you pay them? How do you compensate them? We can't do fee splitting here. And so it's like you want to do commission, but you really can't because of the fee splitting laws. So it's a matter of productivity. And do we look at their overall contribution to the practice, or is it what do they sell? What are they injecting all day, or what lasers are they going to do? It's more than that, right? It's how they contribute to the practice, to the experience, the patient experience, the ambiance. And so I think there's always a struggle there and a rub of I need them to sell, obviously ethically, but I also need them to be just good citizens in the practice and be good stewards of our brand. But I can't really pay them for that because that means they're not going to be with patients. And so I think there's just always a bit of a rub there. So at the end of the day, I think a lot of it's just many of them are brand new business owners. They have not done this before. This is their first real entrepreneurial journey. And it's an intense business here. It's extraordinarily competitive, very cutthroat. And the margins are very small. I think people have a very disillusioned vision that we make all this money in aesthetics, and we really don't. Yeah. There's just not much margin if you think about cost of goods sold, the cost to advertise, your providers, your malpractice insurance, your software systems. There just isn't that big of a gap there. And so you got to see a lot of patients, or you have to see very few and do a lot of work to make it all happen. And I think that's just a big struggle for people in the beginning.
Tiphany, do you have a top 5 for nurse injectors who want to start off with their own med spa, business-wise? What should they do?
What should they do? There are so many things. I think the first thing is you have to understand who you want to be. You have to know what you want your brand to be, what you believe in, why you're doing it. I think the idea is if it's just for money, it's not going to work, right? You have to really think about who you are at the core.
It's the why. I love it.
You have to start there. It'll never work. And I think too, knowing your business model. Do you want to be low margin, high volume, or high margin, low volume? Like, what do you want your practice to be? Is it concierge, high touch, or is it going to be more of a factory kind of thing? Because it dictates your marketing strategy, it dictates your leadership strategy, who you hire, your front desk. I mean, it dictates everything. I think once you sort of understand those two things, you can look at more of the business aspect, which is obviously legal being the primary. Get all your things in order, your house in order. Hire a great attorney and have them forever. Like, you need paperwork, consents, questionnaires, legal documentation. That has got to be one of the first things that you ever do. And I think it gets often forgot about until it's an emergency. And it has to be the first thing, in my opinion, to really get the structure in place. Then as you look at that, it's like, what does your capital look like? Are you going to have lots of inventory on the shelf? Are you going to build the Taj Mahal? And when you think about that, can you fund it? How long will you be cash negative before you actually start to make money? And I think that will dictate in the beginning. Start small. I mean, I think people they want to swing for the fences, like start a little smaller, make sure you can make enough money in the beginning to really get things going and not have to have a big debt service in the beginning. So I think those are the key things. And then as you go along, you have to know what you want to give away and who you're going to give away to. The practice manager is critical. I think if you're trying to become an injector and also a business owner at the same time, you are going to be in a world of hurt working 24/7. I think you have to have help early on. It's just a non-negotiable. So I think that's a big part. And then lastly, really, is your marketing strategy. You have to think about websites and SEO. It doesn't sound very sexy, but if you don't have a great website and SEO, you can build a great practice. You can have great skill set, but no one's going to come because they can't find you. And so you have to really think about from the very beginning with that why and that brand and that model, how do you tell the world about you and get them to actually come into the practice and book with you?
Love it. 100% agree. Another
change I realized within the last 10, 15 years. When I started off, there was only being an injector or doctor, I was both, and being a KOL for a company. That was the two options as far as I remember. Today, we see a various range of options people have. And one thing which is popping up a lot is these kind of training institutes. So almost every second clinic runs their own training classes and master classes and training institute. What is your opinion on that? And do you think from a business perspective, they pay off?
Well, I cut my teeth in the KOL world. That's really where I started in aesthetics with Gain, with Galderma. And so I feel very close to that. And I am taken aback, to say the least, at people who will start an academy with 1 or 2 years under their belt. They're still brand new. They haven't had a vascular occlusion yet. They haven't had an issue yet. What are they teaching? I have no idea. But I think we see it here very often because they think it's quick money. It's a money grab. And I think we are in a dangerous place in the U.S. of trusting people to be our trainers who still need to be trained and who still quite aren't there yet. And so I think there's a dangerous place that we're in right now of where do you invest your money and who do you go train with? And so I think there's a lot of back-end research you have to do as a person who's going to be trained. I think that it does pay off if you are running a great clinic that doesn't depend on you, and you can then go out and train. If you are the sole provider in your clinic or the sole moneymaker, as you know from doing this, it does not pay you to leave your clinic for a day to go do a peer-to-peer training somewhere. Now, if you're going to go on a big podium, perhaps, but I think there's just not a lot of money in it unless you can run a successful clinic, take yourself out of it, and then go do trainings as well. Otherwise, you're just trading dollars, which the goal is to obviously plus up and gross up, not just trade dollars. So I think it can be lucrative. I mean, we all know that. It can be very lucrative. But I think you also have a lot of liability, a lot of additional legal costs and things you have to think through that you often don't really know about until you get into it and have a problem happen. Like the licensing, do you need to get CMEs? You have to have medical malpractice for your trainees and for you. I think there's just a lot of things that sort of start to blossom from there that when you're not in a corporate structure, you don't probably understand quite so well. And it tends to eat up the money very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And not leave a lot left.
No, I agree, especially if you have these. We had two different types of trainings. One was the bread and butter training, like toxins, and just a great doctor from our clinic, but not very well known in the industry, and that's really difficult. You might charge it. I'm talking for Europe. You might charge 800 for a day, but taking everything into account is not really paying off. And then the other extreme and the other end are people like Julie Horn or, I don't know, Arthur Swift, which definitely have other fees. And if you're at this end, it might pay off. But yeah, it's a difficult business and it's very competitive in the meanwhile. But what do you think about KOLs? I recently realized, especially at IMCAS and AMWC, that the guys and ladies who are doing great Instagram are the new superstars. They're surrounded from crowds of people, while the KOLs are all great people on stage, but not really known. That's my humble experience here. What is your opinion? Would you recommend to take this KOL path? You shouldn't do it for the money. As far as I know, or what I experience, it's not paid very well. The daily rate is not adding up to your clinical turnover if you're a great injector. But would it be a step in your career? Would you recommend to try to get a KOL for a company?
Well, so I think you run a meeting also. You know the rub here. I have to have big names on stage to sell tickets, right? I've got to have the Instagram famous people to sell tickets. So that's always a weird dichotomy of they may not be the best injectors, but they will fill the room.
Yeah.
And so you have
Agreed.
to, responsibility-wise, you have to sell tickets. But as a KOL, I think in this day and age, it is very much a cross-pollinated thing. You have to have an Instagram following and be somewhat, famous to repeat what you said. You've got to be that to get people there and to get them to listen to you. The fear is that if you're not so good, they are listening to you as well, and they're learning things that maybe they shouldn't be learning. I think as a KOL for a company, you get such incredible experience, though, learning how to be a speaker, how to inject on camera, how to run a crowd, how to run workshops. I think what you learn from a skill set, no matter what you do with it, if you want to be a KOL for 5 years and stop doing it, the things that you learn are so important and valuable long term that it's worth it for that alone. But also because you're in the in crowd. You get to hear what's coming next, the advisory boards, the research. I think if you're truly a lover of all things aesthetics, like this is what you do, your passion, your core, then you have no choice but to go be a KOL because you want to be at that table when the decisions are made. And I think you get a chance to do that if you're a KOL. I think if you're an onstage influencer and an onstage podium speaker, you may not always be in that room because you're there to put on a show. And then when the show is over, you go home. But a KOL is part of the DNA of the company, the fiber of who they are, what they're trying to build as a company. I think it's just a different amount of exposure. And so I think either direction's great. But if what you want is to be at that table, make decisions, I think a KOL is the perfect place to do that. And again, to your point, if it's for the money, good luck. It won't happen for you. But if you want to be part of something bigger than just you and your clinic, I think it's an amazing opportunity.
I agree so much on this that awareness and fame nowadays is the currency. It's so important. And I'm running the Inner Circle and Libs and Biz in Miami, and I only can agree on that. You need the names. You need the famous people to sell tickets. That's the bloody truth. What are you looking on speakers or for speakers? How do you find a good mix between fame and Instagram followers, but also quality and charisma, or whatever you're looking for? What is your recipe here?
We have a very fortunate position here. We have 4 days, and we have 200 plus sessions, so I can have a lot of speakers.
Yeah.
I know that your meeting is a little bit smaller, but we can have 120 speakers. So the cool thing about my world is if I have people from all different backgrounds, different walks of life, they all bring in 10, 15, 20 people with them, right? Their own little fan group. All of a sudden that adds up to a few thousand people. And so I think the cool thing for us is I'm able to look at the new up-and-comers, people who are doing really novel, interesting research, those who become a specialist in something like weight loss or ultrasound or a certain cheek, technique. They've made some kind of proprietary trademark technique. We're able to really span the gamut. But what I want them to be able to do, and I will tell you, I don't allow a podium on my stage ever and no notes. So if you have to speak with a podium in front of you or have to have notes on your PowerPoint deck, you can't come. Because in my mind, if you're a true speaker who can work the crowd, those are two things you don't need. Those are a crutch. And I want you to work the stage like a rock star. I want you to walk back and forth, left to right. I want you to be animated and excited, have passion with what you're talking about. And so when we think about speakers here, I think about that a lot. Who is coming out of their shell, who's going to be exciting on stage, fun to watch, has a cool story to tell, and who doesn't need to sit there and read a slide deck. And so I'll try to go watch them at other conferences. I'll call others and say, have you seen them perform or have you seen them, inject on camera? Are they any good? And so I do a lot of background research, but we just do an all abstract call too to say, turn in your ideas. What do you want to do? What are you thinking about? And then at that point we see who has a really nice abstract, who's got good ideas. We start looking on Instagram. We start looking at their YouTube videos. We decide who has kind of that it factor, right? Like the thing it takes to make it happen. And I think many of them are doing podcasts or doing other things all the time on air. So we have a really luxurious, good fortune in 2024 to see them. Back in 2019 when I was doing this, there was nothing. You just had to phone a friend. But now you can see all these things online to see if they're really good. But for us, it's more of giving folks their start. We have a whole program when you come in as a first assist and you sort of learn the conference idea, the mentality, what goes into it, and become a speaker eventually a few years later. And so we want to take them from being like a little baby injector all the way through to being the person on stage who has a big following and who is Instagram famous. So we want to see them in their entire journey.
What you mentioned a number, if I'm right. You said a good speaker pulls in like 20 people. Is that, or 20 attendees? Is that the truth, or is there some kind of speakers or injectors pulling in even more? What's the average? Can you measure that, and what's your experience here?
Oh yeah, the big names here pull in. Their workshops they'll sell out with 500 people in there immediately. I mean, we've got people they'll draw a crowd anywhere at any point. But I think when you look at an esthetician track, a business track, 2 clinical tracks, you can't have amazing, famous folks in all those stages. I've got 7 tracks going at once. I need 7 good people at one time to deliver the content. And so I have to make choices. And so I do rely on our manufacturing partners to say, who's big in your world? Who's your up-and-comers? Because in many cases, we'll give them their start. We'll help them to do the first on stage they've ever done before. And in a low-risk track where it's not quite so populated, we also have all these master classes going on. So your big names are doing workshops that are paid separately from the conference. So it takes them away from your main stage. And so I think it's a matter of, here in the U.S., we have thousands of trainers that the companies pay to train every day. I mean, thousands of them. Galderma has their 500, Allergan has their 500. We have tons of them that do this every single day to different degrees of proficiency, of course, but there's just so many to choose from. But if I can get, 10, 15, 20 who each bring in 10, 20, 50 with them, all of a sudden it's a lot of people. And so I think it just gives us a bigger reach to have a nice variety of faculty. And also because I have a rule, you cannot give the same lecture on our stage that you've given twice before. It has to be new, novel, and different. I used to go to conferences and see the same speech every year, every time, and I said, I'm not doing it. It can't happen. It has to be brand new. I check every single deck. I review all of them myself. I make changes for the speakers on them. I make them look better, change the design on them. I want to see all the content because the audience is paying for a great show. I mean, it is a show. This is a show. It's a production. They're paying for that. And if it's a repeat of Act 1, 2, and 3, I'm not going to do it. And so I just feel like we have to find people who are different, novel, excited, and who'll put in the work to actually make a really good talk that will land with the audience.
If within our audience here today or on this show, there are a few people who want to raise their personal brand, who want to be a speaker at Aesthetic Next in the future, what advice would you give? How could they start off? How could they grow their branding? Which channels would you bet on? YouTube, Instagram, public speaking, TED Talk, whatever. What should they do? And how can they grab your attention?
That's a tough one. I think Instagram is always important. Enough to build a brand. I don't go to Instagram saying, they must be great. They have a lot of followers. But you have to have at least a brand because it means you're investing in who you are and what people think about you. I am a big believer in YouTube, 1,000%.
Yeah, agreed.
I just think that you can't beat it, and Google loves it. Obviously, it's a Google product. You will get much more fanfare with Google if you use YouTube. And I think it gives you time to practice injecting on camera, which is such a unique skill people just can't do. You learn how to inject and talk at the same time, which I think is also a unique skill people just can't quite master. I want to see you training and delivering content. And so I think YouTube's a great way. Even doing podcasts and video is, I think, a great way. But for me, practicing delivering scientific information to an audience who doesn't understand it is always the best way. Learn to dumb things down. I don't mean that, I shouldn't say dumb things down, but to make it where everyone can understand it. Using metaphors and using stories and parables and things. I think learning how to teach people something and checking for understanding and really truly being a faculty member who's teaching and delivering content, you have to practice that over and over again. It's not, you can't walk on cold and just say, I'm a great injector, I'll be a great trainer. It's just not true. So I think every chance you get to be in front of an audience, go do it.
Like everything, if you want to be exceptional good in something, you have to take these 10,000 shoots like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning and go on the court. Tiphany, when did you start Aesthetic Next, and what was the reason to start off with your own conference?
We started in 2019. I think we had about 8 weeks to plan it. And we were just at a place where the only training that was happening was manufacturer driven. And here, as you know, we have crazy laws in the U.S. The FDA is very strict. And no one was doing on-label injections. They were doing tear troughs and temples and all these areas that were not being taught. And I'm a person who, patient safety is like my number one thing. At the end of the day, I want people to be safe and effective injectors. And there was just a big gap. We just knew there was a gap. And so I think our impetus in the beginning was, sculpture was really kind of hitting its heyday, was we have to teach folks how to do this stuff. And they can't get it with the manufacturer. There weren't all these institutions out there yet. And so we really built it on the idea that we wanted to spread great technique to the masses at a price they could afford, because it was very expensive to go to Europe and learn from all of you who've been doing these things for years. That was number one. Number two is a business gap. People were coming into this field and just, droves like they are now, just tons of people every day coming in, opening their own med spa, and they had no business sense. They had no business acumen yet. We thought it was a huge place for us to really teach how to build a business, because if they go out of business, if they open up and close down, it hurts all of us.
Yeah.
It hurts everyone in the industry. And
Definitely.
So that was kind of our two-pronged approach, was really to help injectors to get off-label content access and to help them learn how to run a business, particularly a practice, not just a business, but a practice in this industry and be successful.
How many people attended at the first Aesthetic Next?
I think it was 395.
And today it's 1,500.
50, yep, we had the virtual year with COVID, which was terrible. That's awful. But this year, I think we'll have about 1,500. Last year we had 1,400 or so. And it's all over the world. They come from everywhere. And so it's a really cool, like a melting pot of ideas, a melting pot of perspectives. And you have the European injectors, the Canadian injectors, the U.S. injectors, all together talking about techniques. It's a very social-driven event as well. We have a lot of activities to try to build the networking and the collaboration between injectors. So it's not just you come, you pay, you learn, you go home. When you leave, you should have a whole pod around you to really collaborate with you.
It's very unique and distinctive. I really love it. And so far, I only have read through your webpage and program, but I think it's very well thought through and organized and great topics. Socializing and networking is a really important part of these conferences, which, I mean, IMCAS and AMWC, in my opinion, have transformed to trade shows only. We just recently discussed it. It has no value for people like me anymore, to be just honest. I'm going to meet and greet and nothing else. Grabbing my badge, jumping into a few sections or speeches, and then I'm out. And I know many have the same opinion. So I would not consider these conferences are related to yours. But when it comes to these valuable, great conferences, you running one of, what is your big competition? I'm not aware of any other conference in the US at this level, but I might not be informed that well. What is your competition in this regard?
What you just said is my biggest fear. It turns into a trade show. We are so cautious about how much vendor content is represented. It gives me nightmares to think about it, because I want people to come and get things they can't get for free. And if you come to a vendor trade show, you can get all that for free if you're a customer. I want things that are different and unique. And so we've always really clung to that. I think we're probably the biggest one in the country that's really educationally driven. We have almost 100 CMEs every year. It's a ton of CMEs. Our biggest competitor, which really is a friend, luckily we're all really close, is AmSpa. It's actually this weekend coming up. I'm speaking there, and they speak at ours, we speak at theirs. We share faculty ideas back and forth. We exchange, what are you doing? What are we doing? Because when you're at this level that you're this big, there aren't many of us. And you are on an island by yourself. And so just like the injector pods, we need a pod as well. And so we work a lot with the AmSpa group and have for many, many years. But they're about the same attendance that we have, a bit more on the business side, a bit more on the legal component, compliance component, but very similar in nature. And they do a lot of fun things too. And so we've worked together quite well. There are a few more that are very society focused, like the physicians groups, the Plastic Surgery Association, that are giant, but they are very exclusive and you can't come. That was the other part of Aesthetic Next. There was no meeting at that time for nurses and PAs.
Yes.
There was nothing. And we are very mid-level, as they call them here, which is a terrible word, but very non-physician focused. We were one of the first groups to ever give them a podium, because I just believed in their practices every day. I was always with them as a Galderma person. They were great injectors with great ideas. They had great technique. It's like, why are we not showing them on a podium?
I think nurses are amazing. Most of them are incredibly talented injectors, and I don't fear any competition, and I'm one of these physicians and doctors who love nurses, and I support that very much. Yes, great. What is the biggest challenge when you kicked off 2019 with this first conference, First Aesthetic Next? I assume it's very different from what you thought before, what you imagined. That's how I approach business. I always have an idea what my struggles are, but it turns out to be very different. What are your challenges, or have been maybe?
Well, I had been doing the big gain events for years before, but I always had a team to help me. So I was used to that. Well, welcome 2019, I had no team. It was me, and me. And so I think that was a hard part, is I did all of it by myself for years, as far as like all the branding, the marketing, the speakers, everything. I mean, literally everything.
That sounds impossible to me, because it's so much work, and you research every speaker and have these different tracks. And I know how much work already a 50 attendee event like in a circle is. So I can't imagine you doing it on your own at that scale. How is that possible?
Well, it was not sustainable. So in 2022, we ended up getting help. I did all the hotel negotiations, the food and beverage. I picked out what we were going to eat. I did everything. So now we have a group that works with us to do more of the production side of it, as far as the space and the decorations and all the things we need. We do all the marketing ourselves still. I do a tremendous amount of that still, and again, all the content. But it does take a village. I have a great production company that we have here at Aesthetic Record that helps a lot. We have marketing people that help with us. We have a lot of help now, and that's the part you need. You need bodies. We have a staff of 50 who works on our software side. They all come and help. That's just one group. So I probably have 125 working throughout the weekend on the conference, and it takes all of us. And it still is a struggle, and I'm exhausted at the end of it. But, people learn. They walk away enriched and happy and excited. And so I think that's, you need that. And as you know, at the end of the weekend, when you're just so tired. To hear the stories and the connections people have made and what they've learned and how they've grown is just so rewarding. But it is a lot of work, and it's exhausting the whole weekend. And really the whole month leading up to it, we don't do anything here except for the conference. It's just all consuming.
How many people are working on this conference over the year constantly? Is it these 50 people?
No, 2 or 3.
Okay. So once it's coming closer to the event, then you raise up and have like 50 or even 100 people or 120 people on the event itself.
Yeah, so my staff that comes, they're there selling our software, all of our products, but they're also helping in the rooms, they're room captains, they're helping with faculty. So they come and they help. We have, again, this program with First Assist. I'll have 20 or 30 nurses and PAs that come and volunteer their time for the chance to be on stage with these KOLs, to be their first assist, to be part of the workshops. So we have a great volunteer group, but it does take a full production company or 2, plus our entire staff to make it run.
So I assume you have 3 main groups of interest: the attendees, the speakers, and the sponsors. Who's the group which takes most of your work and most of your effort?
They all do. No, I'm kidding. We have a vendor relations team. They do all of the conference sponsors and exhibitors, because that, as you know, is a massive thing. We have hundreds of exhibitors every year. That's just a whole machine. And they do that all year long. That's their entire life. For me, the attendees are always what drives everything. And so I think they're the work for all of it, right? We think of how it will land for the attendee, their experience. So we really build everything around that. But as you know, the speakers have to give us content, CMEs. I have to spend so much time making sure that we are medically accurate, that we have, non-biased content. That is the most time-intensive part of all of it, because there is no option for error. It has to be perfect every time. And so I think really the faculty and the amount of love you pour into them to get them to come and get their hotels done and their meals and their cars and their flights.
Yeah, sure.
It's just so much work. But again, they make it happen. They're the ones that draw attendees in. They deliver great content. I mean, we are nothing without the faculty. Without them, we have nothing to offer. And so it's time well spent, but it is definitely a lot of time.
Let's dive into the CME system. So you get the speech or the content. Let's take me. So I would like to talk on business, and I can promise you it will be a never ever before presented speech I will give. So I'll provide you with my content. I don't know, maybe July or whenever you want it. Then you have to send that to some kind of government or faculty, or who decides whether that's valuable or credible for CME points, or how does it work?
So the American Medical Association puts forth the rules of what you can and can't say and do. So I have been working with CMEs for, 10 or 12 years. So I do the initial review, and usually I'm pretty spot on. And then it goes to our partner. We have like a joint partner who then says, yes, we'll submit it for you. It's good to go. Or they'll say, this is not good. And it's things like, is it medically accurate, medically relevant? That's kind of one part. But also in your case, does it enrich the clinic? Does it enrich the physician or the PA or the nurse in their daily course of their job? And better patient outcomes because of what you're teaching. And so I think in the past 3 years, I've gotten a bit more lax on the rules, because they realize now that the business part is so important that we can get by with more things that perhaps before was just all science. It was all medicine, all science. And now it's a little bit different, but it does take, I would do initial review, I make changes, and it goes to them, and they do some review, and they make changes. But it's even things like if you have a personal logo, you can't have it on there. You can't have your clinic name on there. Because your clinic sells all kinds of products, so therefore you're a for-profit. So you can't put your clinic name on your slide deck, because then you might skew someone based on what your clinic sells. So it's very nuanced and very specific, and people need those for their license, right? They have to have CMEs to keep their license accurate and current. And so to get them all in one spot in the U.S. is a huge thing. I mean, we offer your entire needs for a whole year in one conference, but it is a very strict and very stringent process.
So you're dealing that with every single speaker and every single speech or masterclass. You have to check on the content, the slides. You feedback them, they amend, then send back to you. Is that the truth? And you are doing it?
Yes, I do it all. Yep.
How many is it?
I think last year I ended up doing 125.
Come on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you on your own do that?
I do it myself, yeah. Because it's such a high risk. I mean, I think
sure.
It's also a thing that people don't do well. No one teaches you how to be a CME reviewer unless you work for a company who does CME review.
Yeah.
And if I were to send it all directly to the company, it would cost me 3x as much and it would take forever. And we have such tight timelines because there's just so many of you that it has to go fast and I can just do it quicker. But it also, there's a place, a chance that you can get it taken away from you. If you ever violate the rules, you don't follow the rules correctly in the in-person event, they'll just yank your accreditation. And that's a risk I just can't take. I mean, it's just one of those business operation critical, like crisis level things that I just can't trust. I'm getting there. I am getting there. I'm trying to delegate some of it out, but it just is so critical for us that it has to be done perfectly every year. And I don't want that pressure on someone else. I want to take the fall if it's not done well and be the one to blame, because it really is, it's important for our attendees to have the CMEs.
I love it. Sounds great. Exciting. Let me know when you need my draft.
Will do. And I'll hound you. Don't worry.
I'll be ready by then. The podcast is called Aesthetics and Biz, so we definitely focus a little bit on the business end. I understand your main customers, the attendee, speakers are important, and the sponsors, of course. In terms of business only, which group is the most valuable? I mean, it's probably only two sources of income. It's on one side, the attendees, and the sponsors on the other end. Is there any differences in terms of revenue and amount, or is it adding up at the same level? What is the, from the business perspective, the main group of revenue?
It's almost an exact split every year.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Which is a challenge because the vendors want their name on everything. They want every session to be there. They want to be MCAS, right, or Monaco.
Yeah.
And the attendees are coming, again, for the celebrities, the injectors, the KOL. And I need them both equally, but there is always a bit of an agency problem where they have different interests that we're trying to align, and that can be a bit tricky.
What is the thing attendees are most excited about, or let's say in regards of the post-event survey? Is there anything you figured out they're most excited about? I would say if I review our Inner Circle events, it's definitely the speakers and the stars, celebrities, whatever you want to name them, and the networking opportunity. That's the two things I would highlight. Would you have a different order? Or
I think it's the speakers for sure, because right now, if you were to go to a clinic for like a day of shadowing,
yeah,
you're going to pay more than our ticket would cost.
Yes.
And you're going to see tons of faculty, tons of sessions. So that's one thing, is that I think the value for the money is tremendous. But I also think that content is king in the U.S. The Instagram, the whole Facebook, Instagram, TikTok vibe is everywhere.
yeah,
And there are so many Instagrammable moments on site, places to capture content. They'll record their entire year's content at Aesthetic Next. And so I think part of it is meeting the celebrities, interacting with people, the social events. I think that part of it for us is enormous because they go to a clinic for a shadow day and no one sees them.
Yeah.
Here, they're in their outfits, they're fancy, they're with their friends and colleagues, and you just see, we get millions and millions of impressions and millions of user-generated content pieces after this. Like, it's crazy the amount of Instagram, fodder we get after this event. And I think that's part of it, is they want things that are enjoyable that they can share with their network and share with their patients. And they want to tell patients, look what I'm doing. I'm here learning. I'm here getting better for you. And we give them really a platform to do that because it is sexy to celebrate. It's sexy to be in this room with all these people who are beautiful and they're learning. So I think part of it is just the environment ambiance is important to them equally as much as the content.
And it's a huge advantage for the conference. It's perfect advertising, right?
Absolutely. A lot of it we don't do a whole lot. They kind of come to us on their own because they see it everywhere all year long.
Absolutely, and that I think that's helped Inner Circle or Lips and Biz, that these people are sharing all this content and putting it out. Are you implementing that in your strategy in terms of creating the layout or interior design that way that you have a lot of touch points where pictures and moments can be captured, so you empower people to take or create content for the conference or for themselves or with the speakers? Is that part of your strategy?
We walk around the hotel and say, put a photo booth here,
Okay, cool.
put a step and repeat here, put a cool piece here. Yes, we look for across the entire attendee journey. where they're going to walk, where they're going to be, what they're going to be doing, and where we can put things in different areas to get pictures and to get content. And we have an entire awards show as well. So we do a Friday night awards show that has red carpet and paparazzi, and we have on-screen, like the Oscars, like big on-screen images of themselves and their B-roll. Plus we have, musicians coming in. And there are so many places to take content. And I think if you don't think about that in 2024, your meeting won't survive because they cannot share it. They won't come. They need the double value of that.
I agree. You have to understand the power of social media, definitely. Fantastic. Tiphany, what is the future of conferences? And second question, where are you heading through? What is your plans for the future for Aesthetic Next?
I think the future right now is a bit unknown for conferences here. We're seeing all these boutique conferences, much more like an inner circle size, that are very focused, very specific on an area or part of the face or some particular idea. And we're seeing these big giant conferences like ours start to break up and be much more of a satellite sort of conference idea. We've survived because we just have so much. I think it's kind of hard to look away. And we also have so many of the new people coming in. They come here as their first really journey into aesthetics. And so I think we're kind of safe from that. I think probably AmSpa are other big conferences as well. But you're just seeing that it costs so much to put these things on. I mean, it costs a fortune to put them on. There's not a lot of money in it. And it requires so much work that I think people are saying, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do a little small 50-person, 30-person, 20-person conference. So I think we're seeing that much more here than we ever have before. And the big conference idea is kind of going away. They go to Monaco, they go to all these big European conferences, and it's like they kind of get their feel for the big conference. They want to come back here and get more of an intimate experience. But we're growing because, again, I think people still want it. They just feel like the intimate experience is maybe more valuable to them. They can get hands-on. But then when it comes to, again, the content, the being seen, the celebrity aspect of it, they want to come to a big event. And also we have great content, so it's worth it. We have great speakers. And so I think you have to have both. You can't just be fun. You have to be also very educational, impactful. But we're just seeing, again, to your point in the beginning, though, all these trainers popping up everywhere, these institutes popping up everywhere. They want to have their own conference, their own thing. And it kind of dilutes the market. And so I think it makes it more challenging for you to get attendees all year.
Sure, yeah. But my feeling, but it's only gut feeling, is that conferences like AMWC and IMCAS will struggle if they don't pivot, because we are not willing to travel all the way to just be, I don't know, maybe if a few people will do, but I'm not paying for a trade show only. That's my gut feeling. And people will definitely seek for more intimate events, but they also seek for events like yours, because you need these bigger meet and greets and pictures and celebrity things and various, if I'm going to a focused small event only, I only have covered one topic. So I personally like to still attend one bigger conference, but I would expect to have a broad range of valuable offers, which is honestly not happening anymore on scale at these two big ones I just named, which are happening over here in Europe. So I think, but just from my gut feeling, a conference like yours is on the absolutely right track.
Well, I think even for the vendors who come, they still do here these incredible show specials.
Yeah.
They'll take, $20,000 off of a device. Like, they're still doing these really great economical packages. I think it's still really important. And they're all together in one room. So I think there is benefit where you can elect to go to the exhibit hall. It isn't the main attraction. And I think that's the difference between us and like a Monaco or an MCAS is it is the main attraction with sort of a meeting around it. We're the opposite. And I'm very committed to that always being the case. No matter if it's now, 15 years from now, whenever it is, it will always be an educational conference first with vendors who are supporting it and hopefully offering great promotions and deals and things on site for attendees. But we need them. Obviously, we want to promote them and make them part of the conference, but it has to be about the employee or the attendee education, most importantly.
Tiphany, I so much appreciated this podcast. My heart always opens when I feel on the other end is another entrepreneur, and I can tell you just by how you answer these questions, how laser sharp and focused and accurate you have these numbers and skills and twists and secrets you need for running companies and building companies. It's always a pleasure for me. Thank you so much. But I have one more question.
Eventually, I'm coming. At some point, I'm going to make it over.
Yes, I would love that. First, we meet in Dallas in September. I'm looking very much forward to that. I'm not sure if you have a few minutes for me or half an hour for a drink. You're probably very, very busy, but we will follow up then. And I would love to have you here in Europe one day, definitely. But I have one question left, which links a little bit into the future of conferences. What is the future of aesthetics? Assume in 10, 15 years, what is the aesthetic industry look like?
Well, here at least, it'll be a lot of big chains that are all owned by the same private equity companies. So I think we're going to see this disenfranchised model we have now, where everyone's operating on their own, will go away, and we'll start to see more consolidation, which I think is great for the business aspect of our industry. And also safety, compliance, I think it'll just help a lot. But I do think we're going to see this idea of walking in, getting your Botox, getting your filler, start to be even less important and much more focused on this natural exosomes idea. I think this regenerative mindset in the U.S. is just exploding. People want to feel good from the inside out. And so I think we're going to start to see aesthetics and wellness really converge and be much more of a healthcare ecosystem and not just about the aesthetics part of it. I think we're going to see much more of a wellness flair. We're already seeing it here in a big way, but I think what's coming from the FDA in a couple of years with this injectable exosomes idea, I think science is going to come back and take a main stage in aesthetics. And I'm a big nerd, and I cannot wait for that to happen. I can't wait to see what goes on whenever we look at exosomes and all these different things that are coming. But I feel like we're going to have a much more unified industry with real standards, real rules, real regulations, which is perfect as we introduce more of this scientific regenerative medicine into our industry in the next 5-7 years. We need it before that happens.
What about longevity in preventive medicine? Is that part of this journey?
Well, I think if you just look at the lip trends, the people who are coming in at 21, worried about their lips, and they already care about that, to make them care about other things on their healthcare journey early on is not that much of a leap.
Yeah.
We can start thinking about things like even like exosomes, just for general skincare, skin cancer, preventative medicine, things that, vitamins, IVs, all these things that we want to do in the wellness clinic can now come into aesthetics under the sort of the disguise or the cape of aesthetics, because aesthetics sounds a lot sexier than preventative medicine.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think to get them in the door is not that hard, and I think we're not that far away from it, especially as we think about the post-COVID world that we live in. People are much more in tune with their health now, and so I think a good practitioner in aesthetics is thinking about that long term. How do I make my clinic more than just aesthetics and much more about the whole person and the whole body? I think sexual wellness being a big part of that.
Yeah.
Hair transplants are back again. We're looking at hair all the time. That's all connected to your core and to your sort of health center. And I think we're not far off from that really becoming a big part of our clinics.
Fantastic. Can't wait. Thank you so much, Tiphany. Thank you. Looking
You're so
forward to see you very soon. Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me on today. I appreciate it. It was great.